David. Good evening all. As David pointed out, I'm Adrian. I guess used to live in Germany, and I guess I've got a little story to tell about I guess my time over there. Now I worked for a company called MAN Diesel and Turbo. We were situated in Augsburg, Germany. It's in Bavaria, so there was lots of beer and sausages. Now, the plant I worked in dates back to 1840. So it's got a bit of history about it. The company dates back to 1758. So I guess we had John from Sharp & Howells tell us that they were 1911 or something around there. Europe has a few things that are a little bit older. Now, I guess you might say, I'm talking about diesel engines, we're talking about ship engines. Why would you have it there? That's my question. Why would you build ship engines in the middle of Germany, all the way from the sea?
I find not.
Does anyone know?
German logic.
The source of materials?
This person here, Rudolf Diesel. He invented the first diesel engine.
No, he didn't. He was beaten by several years by a British gentleman whose name isn't quite in here at the moment. I'll advise you by email.
He had the first patent.
Gotcha.
He built, I think, 150 odd engines. They were called oil engines. What he did was to increase the pressure considerably and make them more practical.
Well, I think the other ones were oil burning, and these were self-ignition. But I guess Rudolf Diesel had the first patent, and I guess the first diesel engine was actually his third attempt. Now, he started in 1893. It took him 4 years to get that, and I guess he was situated in Augsburg where I worked. There's a little shrine there. They're quite proud that they had that type of history. I've actually seen the engine. I'm not allowed to touch it, but seen the engine. Yeah. Just a bit of information. The first engine, which was actually the third, but could be 103. One cylinder. It's a 4-stroke diesel engine. Now, if anyone, do you need me to explain 4-stroke?
No.
No? Good. Water-cooled air injection of fuel. It had a bore of 250 mil, stroke of 400. So we're talking about something quite small in terms of, I guess, the biggest scheme of diesel engines. A displacement of 19.6 litres, which is quite impressive for a single cylinder. An RPM of 172. And have a look at the fuel consumption. 317 grams. And an output of 14.7 kilowatts. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. If we compare that to, I guess, the things I used to play with, this is, I guess, it's a 9-cylinder inline engine, has a bore of 480 mil, stroke of 600. So you're talking about a decent bin as the piston. A displacement of 108.6 litres, RPM 500, maybe 515 depending on which country you're in and if you need to be a genset or not. Fuel consumption, 173. This thing is massive and it uses a fraction of what the single first diesel did. And output, 1,050 kilowatts per cylinder. So I guess these things are monsters. And I guess they're designed like that. If you have a look at I put a little person in there. This particular engine, almost 6 metres high, 10 and a bit metres long, width of 3 metres, and a weight of 223 tonnes. We had issues. Sorry?
Sorry,
Oh,
I just said there's a big truck.
Yeah. We had issues. The German government changed the rules on the maximum allowable weight on a road, which meant we could not transport the largest engine we produced anymore. We had to produce it in parts, send it to our French production facility and have it assembled there. I'll get to that. But I guess here we've got a cross-section of the engine. I'll just go over a few aspects, because I guess most people will know the basics of an engine. Down the bottom, we have a crankshaft, we have a connecting rod, and you can see the connecting rod, we have a cap, a shaft, and there's also a head. So this is a 3-part connecting rod. This is in part due to the need to be able to get that connecting rod in the small little window at the side. You can't turn it upside down, pull the sump off and put it in.
What's impressive there is the diameter of that bearing, the crankshaft, and that counterweight. Look at the size of the counterweight.
Yep. And we're talking hundreds of kilos. I'll get to that a bit later on, but these are parts you do not want anywhere outside the engine being ejected from the engine. So, I guess the red part over here, turbocharger, blue intercooler. On this side we have a cam. So the cam is driven off the flywheel, so it's all geared. This cam drives the fuel pump, and it also drives the valves, inlet and exhaust. So there's a push rod at the back here. It comes up and activates the two. A lot of the systems here are similar to what you have in your car, but only bigger and beefier. It runs dual valve springs, so there's an outer and an inner. The valves are actually manually rotated to reduce wear, and if there's a build-up of carbon, it actually, when it closes, it wears that away. The turbochargers on these things are monstrous. The biggest one we used to make had a diameter of about 88 centimetres, big aluminium forging, and when one of those goes, you hope that it's going to be contained within the turbocharger, but we're seeing instances where it hasn't been, and there are bits everywhere.
Why hasn't it got a decent twin cam head on it? Top end like something out of an old Holden.
Yeah, no, there's none with overhead cams. Even on a V engine, it's run like that.
Right.
Not sure. It's always no idea. That's the way they're designed. No, I guess the issue is
It's quite slow.
if you've got an overhead cam, you've got the flywheel down here. You need to be able to gear that up, because if you think about it, modern car engines, they've either got a chain or a belt for the timing. Now, if you have a chain or a belt, that's not. We're talking monster chains, and I'm not even sure if you'll get that. So.
Can I suggest another reason?
Yep.
Ships don't like things being up high, they like weight being down low for stability.
When you look at what we make the different things, that comes.
Oh.
It's quite minor in there.
It's more to do with the speed and the mass flow of air through it, but it's the speed that it doesn't need it.
No, it's slow.
It's slow refloating up in.
Yep. So I guess
Wouldn't it benefit from a hemispherical combustion chamber?
not really. You've got forced induction. You're getting more than enough air.
Heaps.
I guess the valves are oversized for what the engine needs.
Is the piston dished? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
that's
have
the answer for that
we have
question.
scallops for the valves, and it's also dished. But it will depend on the type of combustion. These things are, I guess, obviously high combustion for a diesel engine, because you need to be self-combusting. But yeah. Now, that's an inline engine. This is the same engine but a V. So if you can imagine, this has 18 cylinders. 9 down the A bank, 9 down the B bank. And you can see that the engine is essentially just being put on an angle. We've got our cam over here, fuel pump, valve, turbocharger now sits in the middle and feeds both sides. So you typically have a ginormous exhaust pipe down the middle to the turbocharger, and on the outside a ginormous air plenum, essentially. And it's essentially mirrored, so you've got, for this bank, you've got the fuel pump and valve timing there. 18 cylinder, it's a bit higher, 6.5 metres. The length is another 3 metres. Width, it's wider, and the weight, 375 tonnes. So I guess, David, when you're talking about that, the ship owner's not really concerned if it's here or here. Then you've got a huge mass at the bottom of your ship. So, what do these look like in real life? So this is one. This is in fact an MAN prime mover. Well, you can see the person at the back there. What have we got? 1, 2, 3. So we've got 7-cylinder, inline, and that will be a 4860. So again, 480 diameter bore, 600 mil stroke.
Wow.
You see the flywheel on it. You've got the sump down here, some lube oil pumps, and there's some pipe work. That's the intercooler, and that's packed ready for shipping. So we would tow that out to a low rider, and that would be transported to wherever it's going. Typically, we used to take stuff up to northern Germany, Hamburg, Rostock, and we put on a ship up there and sail to wherever it needs to go.
On the autobahns, huh?
Yep. So we used to. They would seal off the roads around Augsburg about 3 in the morning, and there used to have to be signs removed and things like that, but the police would escort them. Obviously not on this was just for around the plant, but yes, it was big business to try and get these engines out of Germany to somewhere. So, and you can see here, that's, I guess, the cover for the combustion chamber. Oh, sorry, not combustion chamber, but crank.
Okay.
Now, on this side, they're all flat. On the other side, they'll actually have expansion plates. So in these type of engines, if you get an oil mist, so a fine spray of oil, you can have combustion, which leads to a crankcase explosion. And to try and eliminate the crankcase becoming essentially a bomb, we would have blowout covers that would expand, increase the volume, and essentially reduce the risk of these plates flying across the room and injuring people or other machinery or putting holes in the sides of ships.
How do they lift it?
How do they lift that? These are actually air operated. So, well, first of all, we have cranes that will lift that up and drop it on the blue chocks there. The orange multi-wheel is air operated, pneumatic. We lower it, drive it in, and pump it up. In the factory, they were transported on air platforms. So there's a big kind of cushion under there that would lift it up. When it gets to the shipyard, they would essentially just use a crane and drop it in. But we're talking big cranes, obviously. And normally multiple points. So 2 cranes synchronised.
Are there specific lifting points on that?
Yeah.
What I mean.
Yep. No, it's not just we put a sling under it and hope for the best. There's proper lifting points. And I guess that's part of the engine design, because obviously it's not something you just go, oh, we'll figure it out once we get there. It all has to be documented.
How big a ship would need that?
I'll get to that. So, in a couple of slides more. Now, these are I guess the current engines that MAN produce. You've got down the bottom an L2131, so that's 21 centimetres to 210 mil, 310 mil stroke, RPM of 1,000. That's a little Danish designed engine, and you can see doesn't produce a lot of power. And as you move up there, I guess you're getting bigger in bore and stroke. Up to here, that's the engine I chose just to talk about, the 4860. It has 1,200 kilowatts per cylinder. So these are the engine of choice for power stations in Middle America, Central America, South America, and wherever nuclear is not an option and where they don't have coal or gas. Diesel is still cheap, and the type of diesel that these engines run on is ridiculously cheap. I guess pump diesel that we all know that we put in our cars, it's refined. The type of stuff they put in these is the gunk that's left over from the whole process. It's typical heavy fuel oil, you may have heard of that. It's sludgy tar goo that you need to heat up before you try and inject it, and it needs to have certain conditions, but it burns and it's very cheap. So ship owners love the fact. There has been a recent push for dual fuel, so diesel engines that run on gas. Now obviously there's one minor issue with running on gas: it doesn't self-ignite. So then you need some sort of pilot light, injector slash spark plug arrangement, and I guess MAN got into that game a little late, but I'll give you an example of that later.
They usually induce gas in with the air, and the compression ignition still happens, and that's just added in with the air. That's a lot that I've been involved with.
Yep. We'll come to the gas engine when, so I've just got some typical examples of where these engines would be found. This is a high-speed ferry. Now this was made down in Tasmania, Incat. This is Nuchenrira. It's a ferry over in Japan. It has 4 20V, so 20-cylinder, 2833, so 280, about that, 330 stroke. It's a high-speed engine, and those 4 engines produce 36 megawatts. Now in this application, that runs through a gearbox, which is essentially the gearbox is part of the water jet, but it has 4 water jets. So these things, 40 knots, no problem. And I guess I wasn't in Australia when they had the Devil Cap, but that's the type of thing that would power that.
Is that a very powerful engine for the size of the vessel?
Yes.
For that one, yes.
Yeah, 40 knots.
It punches well above its weight for what it was. I think there's a new iteration of that engine that runs for, I think it was something like, it's funny stuff, 1 hour out of 10 it can run at 110%, which brought the average power up. It's kind of one of these funny marketing tools that made it the most powerful in that class. So this is a cargo ship. Now, the cargo ship itself isn't powered by one of the engines I used to work on. It may have been powered by an MAN engine, but that would have been a 2-stroke. In this case, it's got 5 engines, 4 7L, so 7 inline 7, and 1 6 inline. Now these were used to produce power, so they had a generator attached to the end, and they were purely there to produce power for the containers. So you can imagine some of the containers have got drugs in, some have got bananas in, others have got motorbikes, and there might be an odd car and some other strange things. So you don't want your bananas turning up completely destroyed, so obviously they need a power source on board to keep all the cooling containers running. So you can see here, that's 17 megawatts, nothing in comparison to the high-speed ferry, but it's a different application. Here, typical cruise ship, Norwegian Breakaway. It has 4 engines, and these are diesel generators. So similar to the cargo ship, they're just producing power. The modern cruise ship is, I guess, gone are the days of, I guess, smoke billowing out the top and the deck being covered in black smoke. These are all common rail, which reduces the soot to a certain amount on startup and things like that, which the cruise ships love. This produces 62 megawatts, but that's pure power. Now, you might ask, okay, what do they use for propulsion? These type of ships use typically 2, I'll call them azipods, there's different names for them, but it's a 360-degree rotational propeller that sits at the back of the ship. At the front they have a couple of bow thrusters, which pretty much allows the captain to reverse park, spin on the spot, crab sideways, whatever you want you can do with these type of applications.
Avoid the use of tugboats.
Yes.
Oh dear.
So what is the drive?
Azipod.
An electric
Electric.
motor. Yeah.
Electric
Yeah.
drive, yeah, so the power, yeah, okay.
So here, an LNG, liquid natural gas tanker. It has 5 inline 8 engine, and these are dual fuel engines. So what I guess the tanking companies were looking for was a method of making their journey cheaper, and they realised that in terms of liquefied natural gas, they had a lot of boil off that essentially for them was dead, it had gone. What I guess was possible was to capture that and pump that into the engines. So essentially, these ships would travel for free on the boil off of the gas that they were taking. Now, I guess this is dual fuel engine, so there was typically a small amount of diesel being injected at the same time as the gas, and the diesel would ignite, and that would, I guess, combust the whole process. There's another engine that we were developing, which is a pure gas engine, and we had essentially a spark plug in there to combust it. But there's a couple of different possibilities, but for the liquid gas transport, this is, I guess, revolutionised their propulsion for the tankers. This is the engine room of that tanker. As you can see, it's quite tight, and I guess as you can imagine, when something goes wrong, there's not a lot of space. You guys can see?
Yeah.
Just tell me if you can't. Yeah. And I guess I'll cover that a bit later on, but say you've lost the middle engine, you turn up, you've got an engine either side of that still running, and you've always got in your head, well, I hope this wasn't a common problem, because there's probably 1.5 meters in between the engines. There's nothing stopping whatever that's going to be coming out of that engine with you. So I guess it was one of those things that you always have in the back of your mind, and I guess I used to tell all my people, if you are concerned, then contact me and we'll figure out what we can do. Typically you can't, well, you could try, but you can't say to the captain, please stop all your engines. It's not practical. Obviously, if you find something during the course of an investigation that gives you, I guess, a suspicion that the other engines are very close to having a catastrophic failure, then that's fine. Hand up, tell the captain, and we're out of there. The company's quite clear about risks like that. Now, the same type of engine were also used in power plants. So this is just a EDF Guadalupe. It has 12 18-cylinder 4860 engines, so the big ones. 210 megawatts. This thing powers the whole island. And typically, you can see there, it's split up into two powerhouses. Each one of these is an exhaust for an engine, and they get collected and pumped out beautiful black smoke across a beautiful island. But as I said before, excluding coal, gas, wind, solar, a lot of these places don't have anything other than that option. This is I guess a typical powerhouse room. You can see there's a bit more space between the engines. Give you a slightly better feeling inside, but the result's still the same. You're typically at there, something's gone bad, and there's still engines that are running. If any of you have heard one of these diesels run, it's a very low boom, boom, boom that shakes you inside. At the other end of the scale, you have the high-pitched squeal of a turbocharger. There's just this kind of a hissing sound almost. Obviously, you need ear protection and everything, but you've got those two extremes. It's typically hot, horrible. There's exhaust gas in the air. You're sweating and you've got all your protective stuff on. It's, I guess, not an enjoyable environment to be in. Typically, power stations were better because you could go outside straight away. If you're on a ship, you're 5 stories downstairs. You need to go up the stairs. Remember which left, right, around the corner to get some fresh air.
I spent 10 years in ship's engine rooms.
So you know the good fun. And then you've got, I guess, the added bonus of, typically a ship will have its engine room split across 2 rooms with a special fire door in between in case there is a fire, so you don't lose all your engines. Now, if you're in the room and the fire alarm goes off, you've got 2 options. You can try and run for the door, which are typically automatically activated as they shut and seal. If that happens, you need to start looking for the emergency oxygen, because they will flood the room either with CO2 or one of the inert gas systems that they've got. So I guess when you go into a place like this, you typically spend 10, 15 minutes looking around, okay, stairs, exit, emergency oxygen, alarms are over there. You have a quick chat with the chief engineer to say, look, I'll be here, you need to make sure I'm accounted for. I guess powerhouse, a little bit different. You can typically run for the door and you just, you hear something, run. That's the simple rule. And I guess this one is a combination of the two. It's a power barge. So it's essentially a floating power station. Now there's a few of these in the world, either in this form as a barge that's, I guess, needs to be pulled with a tug, or you have, I guess there's a couple, I think 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 ex-freighters that have been stripped and engines put on the deck. So you can imagine an old freighter, everything's stripped out of it, it's got its own propulsion, and you've lined up essentially all these engines along the deck, you sail it, put a big cable to shore, and they've got their own power. I know there's one of these in Iraq in Basra, because we were supplying the engines. There's another one in Lebanon. Obviously, when they go to essentially war zones, we do have issues with getting access and things like that. Now, what happens when something goes wrong? I guess I was in a special situation that because we had produced the engine, we had certificates, we had history. So whenever we got the information, email, phone call, we've lost an engine, the first thing would be to get the engine number, and then I'd go through all the certificates. So ship engines come under a classification society, so it could be the American Bureau of Shipping, it could be Lloyd's Register, it could be Garmisch at Lloyd. There's multiple societies. Now each one of them certifies that products that go into an engine have been made correctly. So there's a whole big Bible of rules that we needed to abide by. I can go back just from the engine number and look at, okay, the connecting rod, it was produced here. I can see that it was, I guess, crack tested. I can see it was ultrasonically tested. I can see that, I can see everything. Same with service history. A lot of the, I guess, the call-outs we got were for engines that we had looked after as, I guess, service technicians. So we'd go back through the service history. Was there anything on the cylinder that had failed or the engine that had failed that was a little strange? Or last time the guys were there was excessive wear, or there was a hydraulic lock or something like that. Then I guess we start turning up on site. We'd have a look at the engine logbook. Now on a ship, everything that gets performed on the engine is modified, any modifications is written down in the engine log. We'd talk to the crew. It'd be surprising